Hey everyone, if you love to watch history, hit that subscribe button and watch the video till the end because video is going to be very interesting. Your support keeps this channel going. What if your home, your history, and your entire way of life were erased? Not by war, but by law. We are talking about Trail of Tears, America's darkest chapter. The history of the United States is often celebrated as a triumphant narrative of liberty, democracy, and progress. Yet woven into the fabric of this national story are chapters stained with cruelty, injustice, and profound human suffering. Among these, few episodes resonate with as much sorrow and outrage as the Trail of Tears. Between 1830 and 1850, tens of thousands of Native Americans were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States, herded westward under brutal conditions that led to the deaths of thousands. The Trail of Tears is not merely a tragic footnote in American history. It stands as a grim testament to the catastrophic consequences of expansionist greed, institutionalized racism, and the failure of American ideals to extend to all peoples within its borders. This essay delves deep into the events leading up to the Trail of Tears, the suffering endured, and its lasting legacy, arguing that this forced migration represents one of the darkest and most shameful chapters in the American experience. Background context: before the arrival of European settlers, North America was home to millions of Native Americans, organized into hundreds of distinct nations, each with its own culture, language, and governance. In the southeastern region of what would become the United States, tribes such as the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, and Chickasaw had built sophisticated societies. They practiced agriculture, governed themselves through councils, and maintained spiritual traditions deeply tied to their ancestral lands. From the 16th century onward, Native Americans were forced into uneasy alliances, subjected to violence, disease, and displacement. Over time, colonial governments, and later the United States, increasingly viewed native land as a resource to be seized for economic growth. The founding of the United States intensified this dynamic. Although the U.S. Constitution acknowledged native tribes as sovereign nations, American settlers and politicians largely ignored this principle when it conflicted with their desire for land. The concept of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were divinely ordained to expand across the continent, further justified aggressive expansionist policies. By the early 19th century, the American South had become a center of economic prosperity based on cotton agriculture. This boom dramatically increased the demand for fertile land, especially as the invention of the cotton gin made cotton cultivation highly profitable. White settlers, particularly in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, coveted the rich lands occupied by Native American nations. Pressure mounted to remove indigenous people entirely from the region, setting the stage for one of the most tragic, forced migrations in world history. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, the election of Andrew Jackson in 1828, marked a turning point in U.S. policy toward Native Americans. Jackson, a war hero and populist, viewed Native Americans as obstacles to progress. His disdain was personal and political. He had fought against Native tribes in the War of 1812 and the subsequent Creek War. As president, Jackson championed the cause of the common man, which in practice often meant the white settler eager to claim indigenous lands. In 1830, Jackson pushed Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act, legislation that authorized the federal government to negotiate treaties that would relocate Native American tribes west of the Mississippi River. Although framed as a voluntary exchange, the power imbalance between the U.S. government and Native nations made the negotiations inherently coercive. The act passed narrowly, reflecting the deep divisions it caused even at the time. Some Americans, including prominent figures like Davy Crockett and missionary societies, opposed the policy, arguing that it betrayed American ideals of justice and humanity. Nonetheless, the hunger for land and profit won out. The Indian Removal Act was not limited to the Cherokee. It targeted the so-called 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, who had adopted many European American practices in an effort to coexist peacefully. Despite these efforts at accommodation, they were not spared. Resistance was widespread. Some tribes signed removal treaties under duress, hoping to preserve a fraction of their people and land. Others resisted through legal challenges, and in some cases armed conflict. Yet the momentum of removal was unstoppable under Jackson's administration. The Cherokee Nation and legal battles among the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee mounted the most significant legal resistance. Having adopted a written constitution, established a government modeled after the U.S. system, and even created a written language thanks to Sequoyah, the Cherokee hoped that assimilation would protect them. They had embraced agriculture, built schools, and converted to Christianity in large numbers. In the face of increasing pressure from the state of Georgia, which passed laws stripping them of legal protections and seizing Cherokee land, the Cherokee Nation turned to the U.S. Supreme Court for help. In Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, ruled that the Cherokee Nation was a distinct political community with sovereign rights that the state of Georgia could not violate. In a just system, this decision would have secured the Cherokees' right to remain on their land. However, President Jackson reportedly responded with contempt for the ruling, allegedly stating, "John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it." Whether he said these exact words is debated, but his actions made clear his disregard for the court. The executive branch refused to enforce the ruling, and Georgia continued its assault on Cherokee sovereignty. This stunning failure of the federal government to uphold the rule of law exposed the deep rot of racism and expansionism at America's core. The fate of the Cherokee and other tribes was sealed not by lack of legal merit, but by the naked exercise of power. Forced relocations. The process of removal began in earnest following the signing of the Treaty of New Echota in 1835, a treaty agreed to by a small, unauthorized faction of the Cherokee. The majority of the Cherokee people and their official leadership rejected the treaty, but it was nonetheless ratified by the U.S. Senate. In 1838, under the presidency of Martin Van Buren, U.S. troops led by General Winfield Scott began the forcible eviction of the Cherokee. Men, women, and children were rounded up, often at gunpoint, and herded into stockades. Families were separated, homes, possessions, and sacred sites were lost forever. The journey westward, spanning over 1,200 miles, was brutal. The Cherokee were forced to march through harsh weather with inadequate food, clothing, and shelter. Disease, starvation, and exhaustion claimed thousands of lives. Estimates suggest that as many as 40 of the 16,000 relocated Cherokee died during the journey. Nearly a quarter of the population. This forced migration came to be known as the Trail of Tears, a name that captures but a fraction of the anguish endured. For many survivors, the suffering did not end upon reaching Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. The land was unfamiliar, the soil often poor, and the trauma of displacement haunted generations. The Cherokee were not alone. Other tribes, including the Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole, faced similar ordeals. The Choctaw, in fact, were among the first to be removed and described their journey as a trail of tears and death. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more amazing history content, and don't forget to hit the bell icon.